So first, I just want to thank each of you for joining us here today. We're here to talk through upgrades in the Acumatica space. So I appreciate you all taking some time out of your day to be with us. The presentation itself should take somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes just for your reference. And then we'll wrap it up at the end with a question and answer. But upgrades are a huge part of customer satisfaction and kind of the general customer sentiment in the Acumatica space. So that's why we're here today. So my name is Garrett Rochell. I'm Director of Growth here at Sprinterra, and I'll be your presenter today. So with that, I'm going to move forward and we're going to take a look at the agenda for today's call. So we're going to start just by going into why upgrades, why now, why is now a good time, and what are some of the main goals that we're looking to get out of this. We'll talk through some of the common pain points and shortcomings that we're seeing kind of in the space right now. And this will be both from a VAR perspective and end user perspective, and even from the ISV side as well. We'll talk through some solutions and best practices to kind of mitigate some of those pain points that we're seeing. And then we'll take kind of a big picture view of what the ideal upgrade life cycle looks like. And then we'll spend a couple of minutes to talk about Sprinterra's approach to upgrades. We do have an upgrade program that we offer, so we'll talk through how all of that's kind of incorporated in there. And then we'll close it out just by talking about a couple of tools and resources that are available to the general community. So once we're done with that, we'll open it up for any questions that you may have, and we'll have time for a Q&A at the very end. All right, so first, why talk about upgrades? So adherence to upgrade best practices is very important, and it has a huge impact on the client experience. Upgrades are one of the big parts of how the end user views Acumatica, views their relationship with you as the VAR, and views the relationship with ISVs. And at Sprinterra, as we've built out our upgrade program, we've had the privilege and opportunity to speak with many different VARs, many different ISVs, and many different end users just to get a feel for their experience to this point with upgrades, some of the, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what we've noticed is there's a pretty big variance in client experience with upgrades. So there's a big range of client experience, but that also means there's a pretty big range in the processes and the best practices that different VARs have in place for managing those upgrades. So we really want to start the conversation around best practices for upgrades and turn it into kind of a collaborative thing where as a community we can work to continue to improve how we're dealing with upgrades, with the end result of a happier client and a healthier ecosystem in general. In addition to that, we've got a couple big upgrade milestones coming up. We've got the September always current wave. So for the clients who are scheduled for that, that's just a couple of months away at this point. For the most part, we've probably already got sandboxes in place, may have started some testing for that as well. But that's a big moment that's upcoming. We've also got 25R2 coming here in just a few months, where the modern UI is going to be fully available. So that's going to be, another variable to kind of add to the upgrade cycles that are coming as we're moving from classic to modern. Whenever our clients are making that transition, that's something to keep an eye out for as well. And then additionally, from a dollars and cents perspective, want to talk through, what makes the most sense as far as how we approach our upgrades. And really, this comes down to, you really have a couple of options when you're approaching upgrades. You can, invest heavily time, money, effort, kind of on the front side and sandbox testing to do very thorough testing. And that typically leads to a little bit of a smoother execution of that upgrade in production, probably less intensive support following that upgrade, as opposed to kind of the reverse approach to go a little lighter on the initial testing. And then once the upgrade is pushed through into production, to be a little more reactive and to devote, a little heavier on resources to actual supporting that upgrade once it's in place, and maybe responding to some of the concerns or issues that may present themselves. And in most cases, we see that looking at time, money, effort, it's going to be a much more efficient and a much more affordable process if we're devoting that time on the front end. All right, so from there, let's move into some of the common pain points and shortcomings that we're seeing. So maybe the most obvious and most easily avoidable is going to be no sandbox. So a crazy statistic that I found a couple of months ago from Acumatica is that less than half of the upgrades that are happening have a sandbox. So there's a big portion of upgrades that are being executed with no sandbox in place. So this is the most obvious driver of a little bit of pain following that upgrade actually happening would be no sandbox testing. This is similar to me to kind of, looking 20 years ago, you go on a road trip, you have your MapQuest printed out, you get halfway through your trip at maybe a rest station and you lose your printed out copy of MapQuest. And now you have a general idea of where you're going, but you really have no confidence in how you're going to get there. And that's very similar to approaching an upgrade without a sandbox. That's something that essentially every upgrade should have a sandbox. So that's a pretty standard pain point that we may have that is very easy to avoid. The next one that we have is managing ISVs. This is a pretty common speed bump that we need to get over. Who are we coordinating with? Who are we contacting? How do we test? What's best practice from their perspective? What screens is this touching? Is there a new customization package? All those types of things. Managing each of those components for ISVs, that's something that needs to be dealt with. Looking at managing customizations, a phrase that I hear pretty commonly is gremlins in the system. And when really, if you're managing customizations kind of half-heartedly or maybe outside of best practices and it's behaving in an unexpected or it has unintended consequences, that manifests itself as gremlins in the system. And that's something that we very commonly see with upgrades where there's customizations that make it through the upgrade and they're maybe accomplishing the bulk of what they were built to do, but maybe there's an unintended side effect that is happening due to lack of testing or testing in a different area or something along those lines. And then there's also all the hidden gotchas, right? So you get through an upgrade and the client says these 3 GIs are not populating. They're throwing me an error message, and it could be something as simple as a field that's now obsolete. Maybe a join just needs to be updated, something very simple. But these little things that tend to pile up, whether it's an import scenario that's no longer working, there's an automation or a business event that was in place that's not triggering exactly the way that we would expect it to. A lot of these little gotchas that are with out of the box functionality and out of the box GIs and reports, but something very small that could, very easy to get taken care of with a bit of sandbox testing. But a lot of these gotchas that I'm talking about, they come in some cases from a client-led UAT process with the upgrade that doesn't actually happen. So that's another pain point that we're hearing a lot and we're seeing a lot in the space is UAT that's maybe not happening or not happening to the extent that it should have. So these are some of the common pitfalls that we're seeing. So let's talk a little bit about some of the mitigation for these pitfalls and how we can approach them to improve the upgrade process. So number one is to use a sandbox. This is the simplest and most straightforward way to improve your chances at having a quality and healthy upgrade is to incorporate a sandbox into your testing process. And again, I just want to reiterate, currently in the Acumatica space, less than half of our upgrades are we using a sandbox for. So again, that's a crazy stat to hear, but that's the easiest step you can take to ensure that there's a place for testing to happen to get all the kinks worked out prior to the actual upgrade. The next one is creating an ISV library. I call it an ISV Rolodex, but this is a kind of an internal store that you can keep where you list out ISVs, best contact information for that ISV, website, processes they have for, their best practice processes for testing in an upgrade? What does the ISV recommend that you should approach it? Who's handling the testing? Is the ISV handling testing? Are we handling testing? Is there a charge from the ISV for that testing? Is there a new customization package that is typically required with upgrades? Just kind of a complete, comprehensive overview of each ISV and how we can best manage their portion of the upgrade process. Because in many cases, we can end up in a scenario where an ISV is getting the heat for their solution not working when in reality, maybe a customization package wasn't updated, or maybe a testing protocol that's standard on their end wasn't followed, just because the ISV may not have known about the upgrade or may not have been asked about the upgrade. So this ISV Rolodex is a great way to, when you have a client that has 3 ISVs, it gives you a very clear and concise idea of, okay, we've got client A who has these 3 ISVs. Here's the 3 different processes we need to follow to make sure that each of these 3 ISVs are in a good spot. The next one is automated testing. So this is something that we've started to put a lot of focus on at Sprinterra, and we built into part of our upgrade program, is the automation of some of the standard workflow testing. So testing of, creating an AP bill and paying it, then maybe reversing that payment, voiding that payment and reversing that AP bill, cutting a check, those types of things. You talk about running an import scenario, business events that need to execute, automations that are running, accessing GIs. Are we getting any errors when we go into GI screens, into report screens, and those types of things? Some of that testing can be automated because it's very repeatable in many cases. A lot of it is just out of the box. It's either accessing a screen or accessing a screen and then going through 5 very definitive steps. That all is, automated testing can very much help in those areas. The next one is, if you are leaning on clients for UAT, is tracking their activity in the sandbox. So there's some out-of-the-box functionality that can do this. There's also a customization package that I know several different people have created different versions of this, but tracking when users are going into the sandbox, when they go in, what are they doing? Let's say you get a week out from the upgrade, and Garrett is supposed to be doing all of your AP testing, and you go in there and Garrett hasn't accessed the sandbox yet since it was created. That's probably a red flag, because now your AP, your area is somewhat of a black hole where you don't really have a good idea of whether or not the upgrade is going to be successful in that area, just because the testing hasn't happened, as evidenced by the fact that I haven't yet logged into the sandbox. So that's something that can help, for you to keep an eye on the UAT that's happening, the users that should be getting into the system and testing, whether or not they have, and the depth of that testing. Then these last 2 areas here somewhat go together. So we'll start with this one, dedicating time to customization maintenance. So we've seen a couple of different approaches to how customizations are tested with upgrades. One of them, probably the most straightforward approach, is go into the sandbox, attempt to publish all customizations, and see if they all validate. And in many cases, if all of these customizations validate, then that's, some folks are taking that as the indication that everything is good to go with those customizations. When in reality, there's a logical step 2, which is, if the packages all validate and publish, now let's check the screens that they're touching. Let's make sure everything is showing the way that is intended. Let's make sure, all of the workflows that are tied to them are going through as expected, and that sort of a thing. Because in many cases, a customization, a simple customization, could publish in the newer version, but it may not necessarily work exactly as intended when it was built in the previous version. So this is something that's very important, is having some time dedicated to not just testing whether they will validate, but also testing the functionality, but then also having time allocated to when those packages don't validate, right? Once we get slightly more complex packages where we truly need to recompile the code, we may need to make some tweaks here and there. Having time dedicated to that as well is going to be very important. And then kind of a preventative measure is ensuring you're putting quality code into the Acumatica environment. Another thing that we've seen is many of our client environments have customizations from 5, 6, 7 different sources. Sometimes you have end users who have some technical expertise in-house, so they're putting customizations together. There may be third-party consultants and developers that are pitching in development work coming through the VAR, something from Acumatica. So we have many different sources of the customizations that we're starting to see in the ecosystem. And what this can sometimes lead to is a broad range of coding protocols that are being followed, and some may be built with best practices and some may not. So that's something that is very important. In Sprinterra, we have built an automated customization tool, which has the ability to assess the health of a customization package and verify that it's following all of the, I believe it may be 22 different core tenets that Acumatica kind of mandates, the same strict protocols that Acumatica requires each of its ISVs to follow. In many cases, with the tool that we built at Sprinterra, you can pretty easily get an idea of the new customization packages that are being built, whether or not they're following those best practices. And this is not to say if you build a customization package following these practices that it's not going to require maintenance in the future. But by doing that, what we're doing is we're minimizing the maintenance that is going to need to happen in the future, and we're minimizing the chance that it will need a complete rewrite at some point by following best practices to start with. All right, now let's take a little bit of a step back and we'll talk through kind of from a high level, just comprehensive upgrade lifecycle. What does that look like? So for us, step one is we're planning, we're communicating, and we're validating functionality. So the first thing we're doing is we're kind of mapping out the client's instance. So what customizations are in place? How complex are they, right? What ISVs are in place? What are the steps we're going to need to take to make sure those ISVs are ready for the next version? Who's handling what? Who's involved from our side, from the VAR side? Who's involved from the end user side? Who's involved maybe from an ISV? Do they need to be involved for some of the testing and that sort of thing? So some of the best managed upgrades that I've seen have been managed with actually kind of a small project plan that outlines roles and responsibilities, timelines, when are we doing what, where are we doing it, and that sort of a feel. So step one is kind of, assessing the client's instance. Based on that, assigning tasks, saying we're spinning up the sandbox on such and such a date. At that point, what are the next steps that we're taking and who's going to be leading them? For any of our upgrades, that's step number one, is to kind of break it down into its component parts, allocate them, divvy them up, and then move from there. Step two, once that's done, is to get a sandbox created. So one of the most important things with the sandbox is just to give yourself plenty of time so that you have time to do adequate testing, but then also to respond to any gaps that you may identify in that testing to be able to resolve the issues in the sandbox, make sure everything is ready to go for the cutover to your live system. And the purpose of the sandbox really is for staging. It gives you a chance to stage all of your customizations, make sure they're working as expected, get all of the updated ISV packages, make sure everything is ready to go. That way, once you're ready for the cutover into production, it's just a matter of kind of plug and play at that point, and you're not having to do a lot of the heavy lifting then. Once you have everything staged in the sandbox, and the sandbox is ready to go as far as being usable, fully testable, you've got a project plan, the next step is to go through some of that comprehensive testing. So here, this is what we call system integrity testing, and that would be your standard workflows, your GIs, your reports, your import scenarios, your business events, automations, all those types of things, a lot of the out-of-the-box functionality. That's where a lot of that type of stuff is happening. We're testing any integrated connections. We're going through some user acceptance testing and really finalizing all of those core pieces. And again, this system integrity component here, this is where some of the automated testing can come into play, where you plug in a couple of scripts that it's going to go through, do some auto testing and identify any areas that you may have a gap. Step 4, we're moving everything over into production. So typically this is going to be at some point after hours. And we recommend having a resource available to publish all customizations, to do some sanity checks just to make sure everything is showing as it would be as it was expected based on sandbox testing, and to go through some of the basic functions to make sure everything is up and running as expected. And then finally, just monitor and support. So once the upgrade happens, being readily available for the client in case any anomalies or any emergencies come up. But really, for a well-executed upgrade, this monitor and support section, you'll see a lot of, where did that button go? I'm used to it being here, and now maybe it's hidden in the, the 3-dot actions menu or something like that. It'll be a lot of little low-hanging fruit like that. In the monitor and support phase, if you're getting a lot of the, I can't print a check, or this process, when I click release, I'm getting an error, it's saying X, Y, and Z. Those are the types of things that may indicate that upgrade process needs to be revisited, because those are the types of, simple things that with some, some automated testing on the system integrity side, they're going to be covered. If you're seeing GIs and reports that are unavailable once you make the cut over to production, that's something else that really that can be identified pretty easily in sandbox testing. So that will kind of give you a good indicator of how your upgrade process is going, is the type of errors and requests that you're getting on the support side following your upgrades. All right, and then I wanted to take just a minute or two to talk through. So with everything that we discussed before, I wanted to kind of share how that's helped shape the upgrade program that we've built here at Sprinterra. So we've taken kind of all of those components and turned it into a comprehensive offering. Really, one of the main differences between maybe the standard upgrade managed by a VAR versus an upgrade managed by Sprinterra on behalf of the VAR is the very initial kickoff phase of our program. So as soon as Acumatica releases a new version out into the world, so 25R2, a few months down the road, that's going to be released, we immediately start reviewing and preparing any customizations that our clients have that are allocated to move to 25R2. So let's say we have 55 clients who are going to be moving to 25R2. As soon as 25R2 is available, we start to plug in all of their customizations into our automated tool, which is going to do a couple of things. So the automated tool is going to assess the validity of the customization package in comparison with the new version. So are there any incompatibilities? Are we going to need to make any changes to the code? Are there any areas that we're going to need to address? So what type of maintenance needs to happen? It also assesses the health of the customization package. So is it adhering by the core tenets of coding per Acumatica, that sort of thing. And it's also going to assess the complexity and the level of effort to bring the customization up to speed. So kind of right off the bat, we're getting an idea of, what type of customizations are we dealing with for these particular clients? What's the level of effort that's going to be needed? And then in our own Sprinterra kind of in environments, we're preparing those customizations for that new version. That way, once we get to this point where we actually have a sandbox in place, at that point, we're plugging in customizations that are already ready to go for that new version. That way, testing for functionality, process, all of those types of things can begin immediately with some of the nitty gritty and the technical components of validating, recompiling, and all that sort of thing with these customizations. That's already been done. So that's one of the main differences between maybe a standard upgrade process managed by the VAR as opposed to an upgrade process managed by Sprinterra. Is we're going to do a lot of the technical heavy lifting right off the jump. That way we hit the ground running in the sandbox. Outside of that, once we get into the sandbox, we do automated system integrity testing. We work with the ISVs based off of our ISV Rolodex that we've kind of accumulated as far as best practices for handling each ISV going to that next version. We handle all of that, handle any correspondence that's going back and forth. And then finally, we handle the deployment into production. And that includes customizations, ISVs, it includes all of these sanity checks. It also includes ongoing support. So following that upgrade, we also offer the ongoing support as well. So with all of the kind of the best practices that we've talked about here, we've kind of rolled that all into one comprehensive program and turn that into something where we can really make that process very, very efficient and very, very clean. And I do see a couple of questions have popped up here. So we've got one last slide, and then I'll start on those questions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. The last thing I wanted to share with you is just a couple of tools and resources in the Acumatica space. So first one is this builds.acumatica.com website. What you can find here is all of the release notes for all of the versions that have come out within Acumatica. You'll also be able to download updated report designers. You'll be able to download different Acumatica instances for local environments, for local testing and that sort of thing. There are also some add-on SAF software tools that are available through builds.acumatica.com. I know historically, like the eSign integration, the Gmo integration, and several different solutions like that were available there. But the builds.acumatica.com is what I use to get release notes, to go through known issues that are published in those release notes, and to get updated local instances of Acumatica as well as report designers. Additionally, we mentioned some of the automated tools. So the customization assessment tool, this is something that is available through Sprinterra. And again, what this includes is an assessment of the complexity of the customization package, an assessment of the compatibility of this customization with the version that you're going to, an assessment of the how closely this adheres to Acumatica best practices in coding, whether it would validate and pass kind of the rigorous testing that applies to ISV, so how healthy the code is. And it also gives it prints out a report that's going to highlight any of the areas of the customization package which are going to need to be addressed in order to move to version X, whatever version you're going to. Additionally, the system integrity testing tool, which we talked about, this is going to automate a lot of the core functionality testing. So that's standard workflows, that's your reporting, your GIs, your automations, business events, import scenarios, all of those types of things. It's going to cover all of that and give you an idea of any potential errors out there that you need to take care of prior to the execution of the upgrade. And then finally, of course, the Acumatica community. So you'll see a lot of known issues there. You'll see, you can also get release notes there. You can check the forums. You'll start to see issues that pop up and discussions that are happening in the forums as far as experiences that others are having when dealing with a particular version. So the Acumatica community can be a great resource for you as well. So with that, we're going to open it up for any questions. I did see a couple come through in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and start with those, and then we'll go from there. So let's see. The first one we have: what tool do you use to keep track of the customizations that you have for each customer? So we've customized the Acumatica portal to allow us to use it as a kind of a library for customizations. So within our customized version of the Acumatica customer portal, we have a library of all of our customers, all of the customizations for each customer, as well as it allows us to keep track of where we're at in testing for those customizations, whether it's still in QA, whether it's released to the sandbox, or whether it's ready for production. Okay, the next one. So do you offer hybrid models working with VARs where the VAR still manages the upgrade process, but we may handle the customization piece of it? So yes, we do offer hybrid models. So the way that our program works is it's broken up into 3 components. There's a system integrity testing component, which is your standard core testing. There's ISVs, and then there's customizations. So we can handle all of those components together as a group, or we can handle any standalone pieces of those as well. So yeah, if you want to bring us in to help specifically with the customization portion of your upgrades for a portion of your clients, then that's absolutely an option as well. Okay, so the next question is, do your customers subscribe to services versus time and material? So for our upgrades, they're priced based off a couple of things. So it's priced based off of the complexity of the client. So are they manufacturing? Are they manufacturing and distribution? Do they also have e-commerce? Those types of things. That's one component of the pricing. There's also going to be a pricing component based on the complexity of the customizations that they have. So the level of effort that's going to be required in order to move those forward to the next version. And then finally, for the ISV component of the upgrades, we have a tiered list for ISVs. So we have gold, silver, and bronze. And essentially the way that this is broken out is for ISVs that are very commonly used and fairly straightforward as far as how you're going to be upgrading them, testing them for an upgrade and that sort of thing, then they're going to be included with the upgrade at no charge. If they're a silver or a bronze, this would indicate that they're maybe less commonly used. They may be built custom for each client, or they may be a high level of effort to test and prepare for a new version. And in those cases, those would be charged at either $500 or $1,000 per service. So Chuck, I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but the pricing for the upgrades is broken down based off of those pieces, not necessarily on a time and materials basis. All right, the next question that we have is, can you explain more on the automation testing tool? So yeah, so at this point, the automation tool is entirely programmatic in the sense that it's executing a set of processes, a set of tests, and it's purely the logic that we've built into it. So it's following a finite list of steps that we've given it. So for example, in the AP module, we'll just look at that. It's going to create a bill. It's going to pay a bill. It's going to reverse that bill, or sorry, void that check, and then it's going to reverse that bill. It's going to access each of the GI screens. It's going to access and run each of the report screens, make sure it's not returning any errors. So right now, it's essentially the automation of a manual process of going into each and every one of those screens and performing some action and then providing the result. We're working on incorporating certain AI components into that program, but that's in testing right now. But as of right now, it's purely the automation of all of those manual processes based off of explicit logic that we built into our program. Okay, and so that's the last of the written questions that I have. I just want to ask if there are any other questions that we have. Feel free to take yourself off of mute or type it in the chat. And looks like we've got one more in the chat here. So you mentioned during the presentation that you'll begin updating customer customizations to be compatible with a release as soon as the release becomes available from Acumatica. We would typically need to wait for approval of an SOW before we can perform any work on the customer. That's where the TNM was coming from. Got it. Yeah, that helps a ton, Corey. So the way that our upgrade program works is it's essentially an annual program. So based on whether the client's going to, whether they're on always current with one upgrade a year, 2 upgrades a year, or whether they're on flex and they may be going every 12 months, every 18 months, or something like that. Our upgrade program is an annual program in the sense that from the very beginning, we understand whether we're performing 1 upgrade, whether we're performing 2 upgrades, or whatever the case may be for that particular client. So the early stage preparation of preparing the customizations for that customer to be compatible with an upcoming release, that's performed with the understanding that we're already going to be executing that upgrade. So let's say, for example, we have an agreement with you today, your client, and we're going to take care of the 25R2 upgrade that's happening. That agreement is already going to be made. That way, once 25R2 comes out, we're going to begin preparation with all of your client's customizations in advance so that we're ready to hit the ground running. So that's hopefully that clears it up a bit, but our program is built in, so we're pre-planning. So we have an agreement that we're going to handle X amount of upgrades for this customer, or upgrades for the next 1 year, 2 years, something along those lines. So we already have an understanding prior to the upgrade actually needing to execute of what we're going to be doing. Now, of course, we can handle upgrades on shorter notice than that, but that's the standard understanding. Yeah, so subscription and greenlit from the beginning, that's correct. Okay, Chuck, so does your customized CRM keep source code? So we do have the ability to store source code if needed. Of course, we would need the okay and the green light from you and your end client or whoever owns that source code in order to do that. But we do have the ability to keep source code internally here, yes. All right, perfect. Any other questions either in chat or vocally here before we sign off? All right, just give it another second just to make sure nothing's being typed in chat. And I think we are all set. So again, I just want to thank you all for being here with us. We had a good crowd, and I really appreciate you taking the time. If you have any follow-up questions that come up from here forward, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is down here, garrett.rochell@sprinterra.com. I'm happy to help you with anything going forward, even if it's just a matter of sharing kind of best practices and some of the upgrades that some of the things that have worked well, some of the things that haven't. Happy to be a part of that discussion going forward. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.